No one heard the first footsteps, not because they were silent, but because the world had already stopped listening. The lands that once breathed with the grace of the elves now bled mud and ash. From the farthest east, from caves no map dares to name, came a black tide. This was no mere army. It was the end dressed in steel, fire, and fury. Over 1 million corrupted souls, or perhaps souls that never existed at all. Orcs with eyes like embers, trolls whose fists could shatter towers, winged beasts that tore the light from the sky. And among them, drifting like shadows that refused to die, the Nazgûl, 9 wraiths whose scream alone could freeze the heart of a king. From the tower of Orthanc, Saruman watched. His lips curled into a smile that was no longer human. He had sworn himself to power, and now power marched. Not for Mordor, not for Isengard, but for something greater. The extinction of beauty, of song, of memory. And its target was clear. Helm's Deep. It was more than a fortress of stone. It was the last breath of elven resistance in the west. There, behind walls that had witnessed millennia of peace, the final children of Lothlorien and Rivendell prepared for what they knew was impossible, to defend the light with their backs against the abyss. Their bows were strung, their swords sharpened with tears. But how many were they? 1,000? Fewer? Against 1 million? It was like trying to quench an inferno with a single drop of water. And yet, they still lit the torches. They still sang before the battle. Because the elves know something Sauron will never understand. You do not always fight to win. Sometimes, you fight to prove there is something even the deepest darkness cannot erase. What happens when the first axe crashes against the gates of Helm's Deep? Who will survive the roar of dragons descending from the clouds? And what remains of hope when even the stars refuse to shine? The battle is about to begin, and you are already in it. Today, it is not merely a wizard who raises his staff. It is the last light of hope itself. Gandalf the Grey now carries more than wisdom. He bears the weight of 500,000 souls. He who once guided kings and hobbits now leads the immortal children of the forests in their darkest hour. For before him stand not just enemies, but the end of all the elves have ever loved. Behold the sons of the moon, warriors born beneath the stars, trained in ages when men still crawled in caves. Their blades do not rust, their eyes do not tire, and their souls, they never bow. Each carries 1,000 years of battle in their blood, and today they march as one heart. Look upon them. There is no hesitation, no fear. Only an unbreakable line of silver and fire stretching as far as the eye can see. A living wall, a vow forged in steel. None shall pass. Among them stand the Dawn Wardens, the royal elite of the elven hosts, clad not in gold for vanity, but for honor. Their spears have pierced dragons. Their shields have shattered entire armies. Today, each has sworn to defend Helm's Deep, or die on their knees, their house's name upon their lips. But they trust not in blades alone. Along the ramparts, engines of war whisper promises of ruin. Catapults, not built by mortal hands, but by artisans who weave fire and timber like song. Each projectile carries the weight of an age and the fate of this battle. And, high above, deadly silence. Thousands upon thousands of archers, invisible until the moment of death. Their bows are bent from the hearts of ancient trees, their arrows bathed in starlight. They do not aim, they foresee. For an elf, does not strike by chance. He strikes by justice. Over 500,000 strong, an army that should not exist, yet gathered because the world must not fall without witnesses. But from the other side, darkness did not come alone. Sauron, the eye that never blinks, sends not just soldiers, he sends the end. And at his side, Saruman, the traitor once clad in white, now stained with ash and blood. He who once knew the secrets of the stars, now extinguishes them, one by one. Then the earth trembles. Trolls, not as beasts, but as walking fortresses. Armor forged in Mordor's deepest pits. Maces studded with spikes that crush bone like twigs. Every step they take is a warning. Civilization ends here. From the skies, the scream that freezes the soul. The Nazgûl, witch kings who sold their humanity for power. Their blades do not cut flesh. They cut hope. And above it all, ancient fire returns. 3 dragons, larger than castles, whose breath melts stone. They do not fly. They devour the sky. Orc archers with eyes full of hatred. Catapults hurling not boulders, but skulls. Witch kings on foot, thirstier for blood than ever before. And orcs, hundreds of thousands of them. A black tide that does not stop, does not retreat, does not forgive. Over 700,000 strong. An army that fights not for land, but for total annihilation. 2 armies, 1 wall, 1 question echoing through the winds of Middle-earth. Who will survive the dawn? The elves or eternal night? A single bell tolls in the distance. The battle begins now. The night was long, the earth burned, the sky wept ash. But when the first light touched the broken ramparts of Helm's Deep, it did not find ruin, it found victory. Against a tide of 700,000 nightmares, the elves stood. Not because they were stronger in number, but because they fought for something darkness could never understand. Beauty, memory, grace. Gandalf's staff still glowed, the silver banners still flew, and though the cost was written in blood and silence, the walls held. Sauron's legions broke like waves against stone. The trolls fell, their armor shattered by golden spears. The Nazgûl fled as dawn pierced their shadows. The dragons, scorched by elven fire and pierced by 1,000 arrows of starlight, crashed into the abyss. Saruman's schemes turned to dust in his hands, and Sauron. His eye blinked. For the first time in an age, the elves did not win because they were invincible. They won because they refused to let the light go out. If you felt the thunder of that battle in your bones, if your heart raced with every clash of steel and cry of war, then this is your call. Smash that like button. It tells the world that epic tales like this still matter. Subscribe to Deadly Battle, because the next war is already gathering on the horizon. And turn on notifications, so you never miss the moment when heroes rise or empires fall. Thank you for standing with us on the front lines. Until the next battle, stay deadly.